Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Happy November. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and staying well during these times. I know it can be anxiety-inducing, but yeah, just take it. We're all be kind to ourselves. Welcome to this joint IRPIC meeting among the data, also data management, the Sea Ice and the Permafrost teams on caring for Arctic data and Indigenous data sovereignty series, ethical stewardship in research. My name is Cynthia Garcia. You can call me Cindy. I'm a program manager with the Arctic Research Program, which sits within NOAA's Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing, or we call GOMO. I'm joining this call from the ancestral home of the Anacostan and Piscataway peoples here in Maryland and Washington, D.C., and I'm helping co-lead the data team with my co-lead, Lauren Decker, probably is in the call, as well as the other co-leads of the Permafrost and Sea Ice team. And I will stop here to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And I'm not sure if Lauren is in the call. Is Lauren in the call? All right, I see Lauren. Go ahead, Lauren, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lauren Boldrick. I heard another background noise, so I was just making sure. I'm Lauren Boldrick. I am with EPA. I sit in Anchorage, Alaska, then Dene Peoples Lands. I see someone else mentioned Denina in the chat. Happy to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to facilitating the discussion later. And I'm one of the federal co-leads for the Permafrost team. Thank you.
Fantastic. I also see Kyle from Permafrost team.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kyle Larn. I'm at the Woodwell Climate Research Center. Yeah, happy to be a part of this meeting. I think it's really important stuff we're talking about. Thanks.
Kyle, and from data team, we also have Lauren Decker.
Hi, I'm Lauren Decker. I'm one of the non-federal co-leads with Cindy.
Thanks, Lauren. And then lastly, I see Lenny in the call from Sea Ice team.
Yes, thank you. I'm Lenny. I'm a marine biologist based in Denmark.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Those are the co-leads that help make this meeting happen. So for those of you who are new to IRPIC or need a quick refresher on who IRPIC is, the IRPIC is the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. It brings together leaders from agencies, departments, and offices across the U.S. federal government to enhance collaboration on research in the Arctic. IRPIC Collaborations, on the other hand, is the public branch of IRPIC. It aims to facilitate interagency communication, coordination, and collaboration to advance Arctic science. At the moment, we're working on our Arctic research. We are under the Arctic Research Plan for 2022 to 2026. And we're currently evaluating and revisiting the next bit, the biennial implementation plan, which is 2025 to 2026, which will be released this month. The plan has objectives and deliverables based on the different themes, and one of those specifically to answer this or to in relation and related to this meeting is to explore and encourage fair and care data management principles in Arctic research. So for this meeting, the goal is to introduce and explore the implementation of FAIR, which is the collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics principles in Arctic research data management. We will learn about integrating care metadata from Arctic Data Center team, discuss applying care principles in research planning and the data management plan, or we call the DMPs, with insights from NCAR. The goal is to enhance our understanding of ethical data practices that respects and benefit Indigenous communities, improving our approach to Arctic research, data governance. We also want to brainstorm other ideas and potential investments projects to advance care principles in Arctic research. I mentioned earlier that this is a series, so this is the first in a series around care principles and Indigenous data sovereignty. So please stay tuned for information about future meetings on this topic. For other communities of practice or collaboration teams present here, if you're interested in collaborating with us on these topics, please reach out to us. And then lastly, I want to introduce the part of this discussion where we prepared a crowdsourcing document, which my colleagues here will share in the chat. So this document is designed to gather your thoughts, experiences, and ideas about the topic. So it's not just the speakers who will share their expertise, you as well as the audience and part of the call. So Lauren from our Permafrost team, co-lead, will be leading the discussion later during the meeting. All right, at this point, I'll turn it over to Lenny to introduce our speakers for this call. Go ahead, Lenny.
Thank you, Cindy. I would very much like to welcome the first speakers of this talk, who are Nicole Greco and Angie Garcia. They're both community engagement and outreach coordinators at the NSF Arctic Data Center. And they're going to talk about implementing CARE, best practices for ethical research and sensitive data documentation at the Arctic Data Center. Thank you very much, both.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lenny, for that introduction. So as mentioned, I'm Angie Garcia. I'm one of the community engagement and outreach coordinators at the Arctic Data Center and Data One at the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, alongside with my partner, Nicole. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about how we try to implement CARE as best as we can at the Arctic Data Center. So a little introduction to the Arctic Data Center. We're best known in the research community as a data archive funded by the National Science Foundation. So many Arctic researchers upload their data to preserve it for the future and make it available for reuse. We have a variety of different tools and support services offered by us, like our data discovery portals and our data rescue projects. And as a team, we work with researchers to curate their data and help create metadata. And our outreach team connects researchers to our data management, training opportunities, and so much more. So the Arctic Data Center has a wide variety of different disciplines spanning most regions in the Arctic and the subarctic, as you can see on that graph there. Has a variety of different disciplines, and the numbers on the map represent the number of data sets in that specific region. It's a little hard to see that on this image, but if you go onto our page and go ahead and search for data, you can see where each of those data sets are coming from. So you can search data by the data attribute, annotation, author, location, taxon, and so many other ontologies that we have. And for the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Nicole Greco.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. So I'm going to get into kind of everything about CARE and start off with introducing FAIR, because I feel like they kind of go hand in hand with each other. So with FAIR, we like to think about data that anyone can use because there's sufficient metadata and it's tidy and it's findable. And this emphasizes making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable to maximize its value for research. And then as far as CARE, this was developed by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, and this promotes Indigenous data sovereignty, meaning that Indigenous knowledge holders and community members have the right to decide how the data is shared and used. And so CARE emphasizes the responsibility and the ethical handling of data for the collective benefit of society. So diving a bit deeper into CARE, we'll go over each letter really quickly. So the first letter, C, stands for collective benefit, meaning that Indigenous people should be able to derive benefit from the data. The A stands for authority to control, and this means that the rights and the interests of Indigenous peoples must be recognized, and they must have the right to actually control the data. The R stands for responsibility, which states that researchers working with Indigenous data are responsible for sharing how the data support Indigenous people's self-determination and their collective benefit. And then the E stands for ethics, and this states that the rights and well-being of Indigenous people should be the primary concern at all stages of the data life cycle. So the Global Indigenous Data Alliance also has some recommended tips for supporting Indigenous data sovereignty. And this isn't all of them, but some of them include recognizing and promoting data sovereignty, using existing tribal and Indigenous data governance protocols and procedures when you're doing your work, supporting Indigenous scholars and community-driven research, and then using local context notices, which I'll talk about a bit more towards the end of the talk. So part of CARE includes Indigenous data sovereignty and knowing how to work with sensitive data, both of which we value greatly at the Arctic Data Center. And we encourage you to learn more about documenting ethical data procedures and sensitive data at our website. You can go to that using the QR code here, and I'm going to share a bunch of links in the chat at the end of the talk as well. But I'll be showing some of the examples of these resources that we have in the next few slides. So when submitting data to the Arctic Data Center, we require that all researchers flag their data with the level of sensitivity it has. And this ranges from data that does not include any sensitive or protected information, which you would mark with that blue tag, data that's sensitive, but it has minimal risk because it's been anonymized or it's summarized to remove identifying information. And then there's data that's sensitive and could cause harm or violate statutes. And so if your data is noted as significantly risky, our data curation team will work with you to determine if the published data can be altered to remove the sensitive information and protect human subjects, but still be published as an open source data set. We also require researchers to describe how their data collection procedures followed the community standards for ethical research practices. This would include the CARE principles. And this is something that we implemented in February of 2022, so it's still relatively new. But we ask you to be very specific about any issues or steps that have been taken to ensure ethical practices. And then after we receive a submission, our data team works with researchers to kind of fine-tune their descriptions, especially if they've originally indicated that they might not have any ethical considerations to take. We kind of help people think about it in a different way. And so additionally, we have a newly updated website with resources for ethical research practices, and that provides tips for writing ERP statements and some ethical concerns to consider depending on your field. So this is really helpful to kind of think about it applying to your own research. So we provide resources for general Arctic research, for archaeology and paleontology, for human participation and sensitive data, for marine sciences, physical sciences, plants and soil sciences, spatial data, and wildlife sciences. And you can find the link to that in the upper right corner, and I'll also post it at the end during the discussion. And then this is a summary of our ethical research practice statements that we've received from researchers since February 2022 until the present. So as ethical research practices are becoming an increasingly important part of Arctic research, the Arctic Data Center requires that you provide a description of these. And it's anything that you've considered before, during, or after data collection. And these are submitted as part of your metadata. So you'll notice that on the left, there's ERP statements in 2022. We had about 119 data sets. 2023, we had 277 data sets. And then so far this year, we've had about 279 data sets. So these are increasing throughout time. And we're also finding that statements tend to improve throughout time. So you'll notice that the original submissions are marked with the hollow circles. And then the final submissions are those solid circles. And the y-axis is the percentage of statements. And so in the pink, you'll see anything that was submitted as not applicable. And so typically going from the original submission to the final submission, researchers find that this is actually applicable to them and change their statements a bit. The orange includes anyone who had to get institutional review board approval. The blue is any sort of waivers or other approvals. The yellow are following animal ethics. The green is Indigenous land or knowledge use. And then the lighter blue is sharing results with local or Indigenous communities. And then other is kind of a category where they didn't quite fit into any of these things that we specifically asked for, but they did have some ethical consideration. So it wasn't that they put not applicable. And you'll notice that the ones that really decrease from original to final are those ones that are not applicable, which is what we would want. And then the other ones, typically, we have a higher percentage of data sets that are including things that we're asking for people to submit. And so we find that researchers tend to have more elaborate and thought out descriptions after data curation with our data team, when compared to their original submissions to us. So this is just an example of one of the ethical research statements that we've received. The top shows their original statement, which includes categories like institutional review board approval, a consent form for their survey that they did, a short mention that the results are public and anonymous. And although this is a really great start, the researcher was able to strengthen and elaborate on their statement by working with our data curation team. And all of the information in green is what was added after working with us. And so some of these things are mentioning fair and care principles, data ownership policies, stating the ID number for their institutional review board approval. And they also elaborated on participant protections, such as how the data were anonymized and how they would be shared. And then I mentioned this previously, but this is kind of future directions of the Arctic Data Center. So it's not something that we currently have on our data submission tools, but it's something that we're looking into including, and these are local context labels and notices. So local context labels and notices are a tool to help Indigenous communities and researchers tag and categorize their data. So as far as labels go, there's traditional knowledge and biocultural labels. Traditional knowledge tags include provenance, like group identification, and then protocol, which they outline traditional protocols associated with access to the material, and then permissions behind them. So what activities Indigenous communities have approved as acceptable. Biocultural tags are the same categories, but they're more focused on biological data sciences. And then notices are what we would focus on with the Arctic Data Center, and these are for institutions and researchers to identify and categorize Indigenous data. So researchers can use engagement, disclosure, and collections notices to indicate how they are committed to ethical partnerships and collaborations. And so we're looking forward to implementing these more at the Arctic Data Center, and we're interested to hear if anybody has experience with them as well. And so as you leave today's webinar, we just wanted to encourage you to think about how CARE principles might apply to your research, and if there are any limitations or barriers to applying ethical research practices. And so some of these considerations include any permits required for your research, and thinking about if there are Indigenous communities who would be involved in the research planning process or should be involved. As far as data collection goes, thinking about if there are local community members involved at any point of the research process. And this could include things like study site identification, sampling, camp setup, consultation, or synthesis. And then after you've collected your data, thinking about when you're sharing and publishing your data, how are you accounting for misrepresentation of results, experience, plagiarism, improper authorship, or falsification of data. And yeah, I just wanted to close out with some links to things on our website. And so the Arctic Data Center, as Angie was saying, we store data, and so you can explore our data sets using that QR code. You can submit your own data using the one below it, even if you're not an NSF researcher. And then we also host 3 trainings a year, and they're all kind of in the winter and spring. And so our applications for our scalable and computationally reproducible approaches to Arctic research course are open until November 15th. So you can use that link to apply, and I can also send it in the chat. But yeah, that's all we have from the Arctic Data Center. Thank you for listening.
Cool. Thank you so much both for sharing your work and helping us to understand the principles better and how we can implement them. I would maybe suggest that we take questions at the later stage because we have quite a bit of time for the discussion. Then it can be a bit more merged, if that's all right. But thank you very much for the super interesting talk. Then I'll take this opportunity to introduce the next speaker, Joseph Gam, who is a data stewardship coordinator at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And he's posing the very essential question, where are the thoughts of the Indigenous people? Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
thank
Okay.
you.
So hi again. I am Joseph Gum. I'm presenting Aihea Kamana'o o Kanaka Maoli, otherwise translated from Native Hawaiian, where the thoughts of the indigenous people. And again, I'm from NSF NCAR. I'm formerly a physical oceanographer. I'm also Native Hawaiian, Kanaka Maoli. And I'll be broadly covering care principles, which I think we've heard a bit of, so I don't have to go through the beginning. Thank you. Data management plans, not really too much on the DMP tool, but a lot of this presentation is based off of thinking I've been doing myself about how to address care principles, Indigenous concerns, Indigenous data sovereignty around a data management plan. There's a lot of work, as we've just seen from the Arctic Data Center, about how to take care of data that's already been collected, but there isn't much work or guidance about what should be put into a data management plan as a proposal is being put together. And so trying to think about this now and getting insights from work that's happening at the Arctic Data Center and other places about what they're helping PIs with, researchers with, can then feed back into this step and hopefully help you all have better proposals, help other people do more ethical, Indigenous, helping science. So I'd like to just start off with a quick bit of poetry. It's called The Melee of Kane. Ewi a whanaoia oi, ai hea ka pai a kane, aia I kai, I ka moana, I ke kua lau, I ke anui nui, I ka punohu, I ka ua koko, I ka alawa lava, aia I laila ka pai a kane. And so this is ancient Native Hawaiian chant that there are many verses to it, and it talks about all the places that water is found around Hawaii, around the world. And so they put a lot of care into trying to list and categorize and being able to tell people what these different forms of water are and how to take care when you see some sort of rain versus another type. I thought it would be appropriate to start with that. And so here we have fair and care again, since we've had two great explanations of fair and care already. We'll just skip over this. And we'll go straight into data management plans. And so for data management plans today, they talk about, say, what samples or data are you collecting? How are they formatted? When will they be released publicly? And where are the places that are going to hold your data long-term? In NSF, particularly, as we just heard, Office of Polar Programs, you have to submit your data to the Arctic Data Center. In other places, such as oceanography, there are a variety of more discipline-specific data centers, such as CCHDO, the Clivar and Carbon Hydrographic Data Office, or BICO-DEMO. In atmospheric geosciences, AGS, there really isn't a set repository for data sets to go. So I've helped people doing atmospheric sciences submit their data both to the repositories we have at NCAR, but also the repositories, also to the Arctic Data Center. And while care principles, thinking about Indigenous data sovereignty, Indigenous data needs is starting to bubble up, there really isn't guidance yet that I've found at the agency level. There is at the division level, such as the Office of Polar Programs, but as far as I know, within the geosciences, all of the other divisions don't really have something specifically focused or any mention of care principles at all. That said, I mostly work with NSF, NASA, NOAA proposals, data sets, so things may be different somewhere else. And so also with data management plans, as we look to the future, as we look to tomorrow, in trying to have these data management plans be better for use in the future, we're looking at things such as machine actionable data management plans, where data management plans have DOIs embedded in them or ORCIDs. They have these links to standards, to metadata standards that might be put in that allow computers, say, to go through and harvest everything that's being mentioned in your DMP, and then we can sort of use that either for verification that, say, the data set you've deposited is actually following what you've said you do in your DMP. And this is completely knowing that the first draft, the first DMP that goes into an agency may not be what exactly is followed at the end. But to that, we're trying to work on having these DMPs be living DMPs so that what you submit in your proposal is just a first draft. And as you get funded, you'll add, say, the grant number, the award number that's been given to you. You'll start linking in your data set or data sets that have been collected or generated. And then you have this vision of a document that somebody could go through and be able to click on all these links and find either the data that's being collected or that's following everything that you said you would do. So in an ideal world, what would an Indigenous aware DMP look like? And I have to say that all of these opinions are entirely my own, based on thinking I've been doing over the past year. Some of the limitations of a DMP as it is right now is that proposals are not necessarily made public. If you go onto the NSF awards tracker, you'll see the abstract and publications that have been linked to the award, but you don't actually know what was mentioned in the proposal. So if an Indigenous community or anyone is trying to find out what you said you'd do, that might be hard for them to find out what they do. The DMP is only the subset of a proposal. You're not necessarily going to write out your methods or the justification for doing this. So we don't have other information that might go towards providing context. Not all DMPs are clear on observational versus model data. They might all have, say, temperature, air temperature, or ocean temperature or sea ice coverage, but it makes a big difference if you're talking about somebody that is actually on the ground installing instruments, or if we're talking about model output that could be close, could be different. It's something that I've sort of been grappling with. And should there be a section in a DMP for responding to Indigenous data needs? Or is this better positioned somewhere else? Should this be in broader impacts? Which I would say no, but that's my opinion. And so in thinking about what an Indigenous aware DMP might look like, I wanted to go over who, what, when, where, why, and how, and really make it explicit in this. Where is the research taking place? And as we look to where the research is taking place, we can figure out who might be impacted in the area, and then what parameters are being collected and how are they being collected. And when is this research happening? Is this research happening, say, in the middle of hunting season? Is it happening in the dead of winter? And then why and how, I ultimately decided to think of them as outside of the DMP. Why is this data being collected? How is this data being collected? And so where is the data referring to? Is this a single point, such as a weather station, or is this, say, a circle, a radar station? Are you providing gridded data, such as model output? And if we know the locations of where this data is, we could say compare it against an Indigenous geodatabase to find peoples, not necessarily everyone, but it'd help as a first pass right now. So comparing the coordinates you get to something like native land, and then from native land, which shows all of the known tribes, I guess. I'm not too familiar with native land right now. To where they are, it doesn't show them, say, on a more granular level of towns or migration patterns. But from that, you can use the links in native land, or I believe there's a way through local contexts to notify communities in those areas and be able to tell them, hey, we're starting to do this research, or we'd like to do this research. We'd like to be connected with you and inform you of what is happening. And then for what, if you're just reading a data management plan and you're looking at the list of parameters that they've provided, such as sea surface temperature or sea ice cover, you can make some guesses as to how they might be collecting this data. And is this data something that the communities might want to keep protected? Please let me know if I'm running short on time. And so if the data is observational, what impact is this having on the communities, particularly in terms of Indigenous data sovereignty? Say there's a big storm in Alaska, causes a whole bunch of runoff, and we see a large spike in gold that's in the runoff in the waters in the ocean. Like, completely made up example. If this data is virtual, how will communities be able to access this data? It could be projections of sea level rise, of thawing permafrost, of fisheries stocks and fisheries migration. Do these archives that are holding the data, do they provide links to software on how to interpret the data? And more than just providing links on how to interpret it, also provide guidance and training, such as virtual notebooks that may be able to step through this data and help people look at what the data products are at the very end. It's one thing for NCAR to produce a 100-year projection of model output data over the Arctic, but a community might want to look at their little region and look at it year by year. And so do we provide the tools to do that? Or is this something that people that are using the data are expected to do? These notebooks are not very big when compared to many terabytes of data. So we certainly have the space to store them. And so lastly, I'm providing an example DMP paragraph. Not necessarily the best Indigenous aware paragraph for a data management plan, simply because of the project, but it's a project that I know very well. And so the data being collected at 22.75 north, 158 west is the traditional area of Native Hawaiians. It's in the pelagic North Pacific Ocean and is reachable by aircraft or ocean vessels. The data being collected are physical and biogeochemical oceanographic parameters, and it doesn't require review by a PI's institutional IRB. the Kanakamali, the people have been notified via the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the University of Hawaii at Manoa as representatives. Yeah, there are, I could certainly come up with a more complex one that has to do, that might need an IRB and get into talking about all of the different IRBs that you'll need to contact for the different tribes that are in the region that you're studying. But that's a little beyond me, honestly. It's not something that I have to work with very well, so I didn't want to put together an example that may not be completely accurate. I guess I'll leave it as. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for making us reflect on our data management plans in a more critical and a more inclusive and holistic way. Super good insight. Thanks a lot. Thanks both to all our speakers. Now I'm really looking forward to passing it on to Lauren in terms of facilitating the discussion. And maybe I can just take a quick opportunity to remind everyone to be mindful of their microphones to avoid the background noises, unless you would like to share that with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Those presentations were amazing. My first takeaways, just to kind of get the conversation going, was how both of our speakers today really emphasized the importance of metadata and like long-term data management. I think that was just so important. It continues to be so important to protect Indigenous peoples when we're doing our research, and we're doing it in a really ethical way. In the first presentation, my big takeaway to kind of get conversation going was I really appreciated how it went into informed consent. That's something I hear about all the time in Alaska, is not about us without us. And I think using all of those different protocols, just to make sure our institutional reviews are there, to make sure we're protecting those human subjects and their data. I think that's just so important. Since EPA does a lot of human health work, I just, that really called out to me. And so that would be something interesting to talk about if people have questions around that. I guess one of my direct questions was for those local context labels. I was wondering if those are named for geographic features. I saw biological in there, but I didn't see or I didn't pick up on physical environment. So I was curious about that. And then the other thing, just to get people thinking of things, Joseph, if you want to talk a little bit later about backup and migration a bit more, I know you really kind of emphasize this living data management plan, and how I think we can make that work more iterative is something that I would love for folks to chat about. And then we did have an audience question. Let me scroll down to my notes really quick with that. It was asking if the speakers today could elaborate on the possibility of parsing community data and public data, especially for projects that are federally funded, i.e. NSF OPP, and requiring the use of the Arctic Data Center. Related to that, the person who posed the question was really concerned about a durable repository, and I think that kind of really keyed into Joseph's piece about long-term data management. And so I think that's something we all recognize, is that there's definite disparities with broadband access and the cost of energy to run those data management centers and servers. And with that, I've given a lot of ideas. So I would say anyone is welcome to interject or respond, and I will try to manage the chat that way. We have about 20-ish minutes, maybe just 15 at this point, looking at the time. But we can just have a quick chat. That would be great. Thank you.
I can touch on the question in chat. Yeah, it's hard. Without asking for more money specifically to, say, install infrastructure in remote communities, it's hard to navigate those energy uses, broadband costs. As much as I'm in, say, a love-hate relationship with something like Starlink, I mean, it is providing more bandwidth, even as I have lots of astronomer friends that are unhappy with them blocking out the sky with RF. Having gone to sea quite a bit, having sailed through the Arctic before, you know, there can be very little that can be done. For parsing the data, scientists, I would hope, have their own tools to look at the data and analyze the data that they're collecting or generating. And so it's simply one further step of making their code, their processes, their analysis available alongside their data sets. For our repositories at NCAR, typically we hold data sets that may be in the tens to hundreds of terabytes that are covering, say, Alaska and the pole. To hold a few tens of megabytes worth of code or Jupyter notebooks or something isn't even a cost. So just having scientists make that available at the same time that they make their data available. And this is happening with publishing requirements, where the publishers are now wanting the code to be available alongside the software, alongside the data as a part of open science requirements. This is slowly happening, but that sort of last mile, how do we get it out to communities that may not have computers or energy or bandwidth to run it locally in adverse weather conditions, or even in decent weather conditions? That's a question for the law of physics, I think.
Thanks, Joseph. I do think it is very difficult, and the team, when we were working on it, you know, I think really had a tough time kind of looking over something that we all perhaps despair over, is FOIA, and how the federal agencies can't offer as many protections as we wish we could under FOIA for some of the data. I think it was more alluded to in the first presentation, was that the data that will cause harm if released. And so there is this really careful balance that I think we are all listening, you know, today and participating in, because, you know, it's not a gray area, right? Like, we're trying to land on a dot, and it's project by project that we are trying to figure this out, you know, together, between the researchers and the communities. And yeah, it's just, I think we were pretty much despairing over that comment. There's no gray area. We are landing on a dot, and we're having to do that every time to make sure that we're being good partners with these communities. And it's always going to be really hard to land it right. And, you know, we're here having these conversations to try our absolute best every time. So I think your comments just kind of reemphasize that it is really hard. And I think there's more conversations. You know, this is intended to be a series. So hopefully we can get in to more of that later. And I did want to note and kind of put out again that there is in the chat links to the best practices and resources. We're trying to crowdsource that. Please let me know who else we can talk to. That was something I really pushed in there, that I wanted to have points of contact to follow up with, because I think the more people we get chatting about this, the better. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I can't quite see if anyone has a hand raised. And if there's anyone from the group that put this together that would like to ask questions or make comments, or just anyone else, I think you're welcome to. We still have a few minutes left. So Rainey, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You asked if that question in the in-game, maybe should we include considerations from the Philosopher's Zone program? I have not seen that. I'm sorry, but I will follow up with that. If you can put that into that shared collaborative document as a follow-up, that would be awesome. And I will follow that down.
Right.
Thank you. And then Nicole, since I have the floor to myself, I did want to go, can you talk more to those local context labels for me to answer that question that I had about like physical environment features?
Yeah, I can a little bit. I am not like the most knowledgeable about these since we're like just trying to learn more about them now to try to implement them. But as far as I know, they're not specific to like any location. I think that they're meant to be kind of like a global thing that can be used anywhere. And I don't know, was your question more on like if like how they're used in physical science or?
Maybe I just misunderstood. So one of the things I've seen come up a lot in my work as a physical scientist is that sometimes we'll hear about through data collection things that are described in the local language that isn't necessarily what we use in our Western science world. And if there's a way in your data that you're managing it to show that those are the same. And if there's a different data set somewhere or anyone else on the call knows about that, I think that's something we've kind of been struggling with is getting each place-based name to show where it actually is.
Yeah, I don't think we currently do that or require that, but I think that would be something really interesting to look into and try to have. Like we have a lot of like tags and keywords when people submit data sets, and I wonder if that could be a way of starting that process and like connecting those Indigenous names with the names that we use for things. I don't know if Angie, you have any comments, but yeah, those are my thoughts about it.
Thank you. Well, I think today was great. Thank you for both of your presentations. Nicole and Joseph, great. I'm the permafrost, one of the federal co-leads for permafrost work. So if you ever want to talk about permafrost, I'd be super excited about that. I think there's a lot of common ground there that could be really exciting for us to further investigate. But again, just to kind of summarize what we heard today, the care principles and FAIR principles are so, I can't even think of the right word for it. It's so incredibly important to everything that we do in our work that's research-based and just in our work in general. But I really want to emphasize that importance of metadata and making sure that your ethical research statements are really important. I really want to, from Joseph's, I love the storytelling aspect that you brought in, the who, what, when, where, why. I always think about things through that lens. That's because I did NEPA for a long time. And I think thinking of the documents that we do and write and the policies we work on, telling it in a story is one of the best ways that we can work with communities because that is our common language. Everyone understands stories. And so making sure that we fully explain things in that sense, I think that context is just critically important in our work. And then making sure that we're always working in an iterative process. That was another big takeaway for me, that once you do something, it doesn't mean that it's done for forever. And you should evolve your documents and your data management with your work. Joseph or Nicole, any last words before we hand it back to the team for their wrap up?
I guess I'll take the time to do a quick shout out for the data sovereignty cluster in ESIP. If you haven't heard of ESIP, Earth Sciences Information Partners, it's a group of geoscience data professionals. I am now leading the data sovereignty cluster. So just looking for new blood, new people to come in and help provide insights, ideas. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do next, but everything will be related to data sovereignty. So there'll be a lot of discussion of CARE principles and its impacts, its effects in the future. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about that, Joseph. And we've been trying to get more integrated into ESIP as well. So would love to chat about that more. I think, yeah, all I wanted to say was that I'm happy to share the slides. I know the recording will be available as well. And Angie and I are happy to answer any questions through email. And there's a lot more people at the Arctic Data Center who are happy to answer like more specific data questions too. So thank you so much for having us. This was really great.
Thank you. And then Cindy, I can pass it back to you to wrap up, I believe.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks to all our speakers. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with the community. And also thanks to, is there an echo? Okay. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the crowdsource document. This is a living document. This is our document. If you want resource on specific things you want to share, toolkits that you're developing, or any publications that are relevant to the topic, or you would like to be part of the next webinar, because as we mentioned earlier, this is a series, please do reach out to us. We are noting your recommendations on what can we do better here. There are a couple here that are really interesting, and a lot of the agencies and organizations and institutions present in this call can refer to this list. I know it's growing at the moment. Feel free to add them as well. And then also the points of contact here related to this topic. Feel free to add your email address and we'll reach out to all of you. All right. Well, again, thank you, everyone. Happy Monday, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.